fellow warriors. Welcome back to the Warrior Enigma. On today's episode, we're going to dig deep into the life and history of a highly decorated former Australian police officer, former corporate loss and risk advisor, and current public speaker and mental health advocate. But before we get underway, I want to remind everyone that Warrior Enigma is not an advice-giving platform. It's simply a method to deliver messages that make you think and hopefully promotes you to be the best damn version of yourself that you can be. I'm going to take a second and read the very first paragraph of a book by B.D. Collins called $1,000 to $1 million, Proven Strategies for Triple Leveraged ETF Success. The book starts like this. With anything in life, we must decide, what is the goal? What is the purpose? When we show up to our workplace, what are we trying to achieve? The daily grind to break even or to find purpose and fulfillment? It is important to apply definable and achievable goals when it comes to many things in life. Doing this helps us have targets and, more importantly, know when to adjust for maximum return. This message rings true in so many aspects of life and falls directly in line with the Warrior Enigma mission to maximize your life returns. If you're interested in reading more and expanding your portfolio with an ETF strategy, click the link in the description to search for B.D. Collins on Amazon. He makes this easy to understand and applicable for every level of investor, so go check it out. Now, our guest today is a 20-year veteran of the Queensland Police Department. His accolades include 2 of the prestigious Queensland Police Valour Awards and the Australian Bravery Medal. He spent years as an undercover narcotics officer before becoming a member of the Special Weapons and Tactics team, where his intense experiences of combat and loss led him to a dark place in life. After years of chaos, he turned in his badge and ventured into the corporate world, where he worked on a number of jobs on his way to the role of Chief Operations Officer. In 2022, he began the next chapter in his life as an author, public speaker, and mental health advocate. Ladies and gentlemen, warriors of all walks of life, I'm so excited to introduce a high-caliber man with an incredible story who is using his service scars to promote mental health and wellness. He is an Australian legend, a humble man with a heroic story, and my new friend, Mr. Keith Banks. All right. Well, Mr. Keith, I appreciate you, brother. Thanks for coming on all the way from Australia.
Yeah, no, it's nice to be here, mate. Thank you. I promise that I'll slow my Australian accent down a little.
You know what's funny is I've actually met some Australians, Troy and the guys early on, and it took me early in my military career a little bit of time to actually understand the guys who had the thick accent going.
Yeah.
It was a learning curve for me, but I used to make fun of some of the Aussies we had stationed with us out at Mobile Unit 5 in Guam, and I would say, hey, no one can understand your British accent, and it would just drive them nuts. So,
Oh yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
it was
we
actually.
don't like being called British.
Yeah, but it was actually in the back of my head because for those of you guys listening and watching along, Keith and I are meeting for the first time right now, so it's kind of fun. But I had that in the back of my head, like, man, if he's got a thick accent, I'm gonna have to real pay attention on this one because every now and then it comes out hard. So,
Well,
no
we're
worries.
like a lot of us, Jeff, are like you guys. You fought the British as you weren't there, but you remember it, and we were transported, or a lot of our ancestors were thrown on boats and transported from Britain to Australia because they stole bread and cheese and minor sort of offences. So, and a lot of us Australians go, no, man, we're not British, we're Aussies.
Yeah, for
So,
sure.
so if you want
No,
to start a bar
yeah,
fight.
yeah. And at the time, I just thought it was funny. I didn't know the true history behind it. But I'll tell you what,
Yeah,
those guys definitely taught me the history real quick on like why that's not okay. I was like, oh, my bad, my
yeah.
bad. But well, let's dig right into. So read a little bit about you, Keith, and I've heard through. We have a mutual friend in Troy, and he spoke very highly of you. But you have a very colorful career in the Queensland military, or excuse not military, Queensland Police Department, and
Yeah.
we'll dig deep into that because I can't wait to hear about that. And then it goes on, and you're just a huge mental health advocate. You do public speaking, and here on this platform, what I'm trying to do with the Warrior Enigma is draw out, quote unquote, the inner warrior from everybody. And everyone has little problems and little things they're fighting with in their life. And it sounds like this is going to be an amazing episode to really highlight some of the key points of what I want to draw out of this entire podcast platform, which is to be a warrior, to be mentally resilient, to work on the issues you have and to continue getting stronger every day.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. That's exactly in my lane, mate. Yeah.
Perfect. So, coming just kind of from the get-go, I mean, I know you joined the police department at age 17, which kind of took me back a little bit. So, talk me through at a 17-year-old kid, what was going through your head when you're like, you know what, I'm gonna be a police officer?
Yeah, look, it's a question that a lot of people obviously ask,
Yeah.
and I think like a lot of cops who joined at an early age, um, either we were bullied, so we wanted to do something to help protect people from that sort of behaviour, or we had family and law enforcement. Um, I was actually keen to join the military,
Okay.
and I was in. We had an army cadet system. I think it's ROTC over there. Not
Yeah, yeah,
sure.
yeah. Spot on. Yep.
Um, but that's where I learned to shoot. That's where I learned discipline, a lot of survival techniques, all of that stuff that was really a system to prepare the generation for the next war, and it had been in place for, God, like 100 years or something.
Okay.
And I loved it. I just loved it. The problem was my home life wasn't great. So, my mother was lovely, but her partner wasn't all that good. So, I was in a situation where I wanted to leave home as quickly as I could to make a life for myself. And I wanted to join the military and for quite some time. And then, I was thinking about law enforcement and we had a recruiting officer who came to our school and started talking about the police department. And went, oh wow, this sounds like an alternative. And there were things within the police department that I'd always wanted to, if I had the opportunity, I wanted to do. I wanted to be in plain clothes. I wanted to be a detective, all of that stuff.
Hmm.
So that was versus going to military college for 4 years, I think, combined with the fact that I just probably, to be honest with you, man, I couldn't live in that home environment for another year.
Gotcha.
So I left at the end of what we call year 11. I don't know what the similar situation in the US is, but it was the year before you finish high school. Um, and the police department had a system where you could join up as a cadet. So I
So
left at
you
the end
at
of
this
year
point you
11.
hadn't even finished high school yet.
No,
Oh,
no.
wow.
So,
Okay. So we have a similar
yeah.
system.
So,
Your year 11 is our 11th grade, and then 12th grade for us is
yep.
considered a senior and we graduate. So, you know,
Same. Yeah, same.
okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Um, so the offer was that I could go to the police academy as a cadet and complete the 12th year. Then graduate as a senior, then another 12 months of police training or indoctrination, really.
Sure. Yeah.
um, and then be a sworn officer at the age of 19, which is just way young. God,
That
I
is,
look back in hindsight and go, man, that was so young.
that's
Um,
incredible.
so, yeah, so on the street at 19, armed, powers of arrest, everything that a cop can do. So I did that. I went there, did the 12 months of schooling, but in that 12 months of year 12,
Hmm.
there was still, uniform, hair regulations being screamed at by drill instructors,
Still militaristic in its
PT.
own right,
Yeah. It's very similar stuff, very
for
similar
sure.
stuff.
Okay.
Just to weed out those who really wanted to be there versus those who didn't.
And
Yeah,
this is
which I
this is
guess is the
before like
same
the
for them.
kindler, gentler attitudes. I don't know if that's transferred much into Australia, but
No.
you can wear a full beard now at police
Oh,
academy and
yeah.
they can't touch you. They
Yeah.
can't really yell at you very much. I know there's times have
Wow.
changed since then when it was militaristic still.
Oh man, if you're fucked up, and I hope saying fucked up's okay,
Gonna
please
send it.
let me know.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you if you're fucked up as a trainee, you found yourself running around the oval, yeah, with the old 303 Lee Enfield rifle above your head. And the 303 was a World War One, World War Two rifle, which was heavy.
Yeah.
So, that was it. Run around that oval with it above your head till we tell you to stop. And like four times out of five, they forget you were there. So, so we call it character building.
Yeah.
So
Man.
all of that was really cool for me because I'd grown up in an environment where I didn't have my own bedroom till I was like 15 or something. So to go to the police academy and be paid a salary, had my own room, 3 meals a day, uniforms, yeah, all that stuff, I thought was like heaven.
Yeah.
So and I just loved it. And my intention was, as naive as it was, to go there, get paid, earn some money, become a sworn officer, and then go to school part time and do a law degree. Because um, I'll say it as diplomatically as I can without seeming like an idiot, but I was pretty bright, so I could have easily taken up a law degree. The thing was, once I was on the road as a cop, even a young cop walking the beat on foot, I was having too much fun, and I didn't I didn't want to be a lawyer. I didn't particularly want to be a defense lawyer ever. So that intention went out the window pretty quickly.
Yeah, I bet. Well, I mean, shoot, at 19 years old, you can trust me with like even an unloaded gun. So I can only imagine, you're already out there keeping the peace at that age, and I put
Oh,
myself in your shoes, and that's pretty admirable.
Oh, I've got to tell you though, thank you, mate. But I've got to tell you, the firearms discipline and training was pretty ordinary in those days.
Yeah.
You
Okay.
know, you fired your weapon once a year if you were lucky.
Oh, shoot.
Um,
Okay.
oh yeah, and I had a couple of friends. One of them, one of them was cleaning his revolver at home, and it went off, and he shot the top of his finger off. Another guy let loose around in his house, and yeah, it was just you had shit like that all the time,
Yeah.
because unlike Australian police forces now, in those days you were issued with it was only a little five-shot J-frame model 36, 38 caliber,
Hmm.
but an effective little weapon at close quarters. You were issued with it and you took it home.
Oh, okay.
These days, Australian cops, it's got to be lodged in the station. You can't take it off duty, unlike the US.
Sure.
You don't carry off duty, any of that stuff. So it was just, they were pretty loose and loose. You could call them rules, I suppose, if there were any that existed.
Sure.
But so yeah, pretty fast, sort of fly
And
by the
then
seat of your pants stuff.
how did it evolve then from, and at this point, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're basically walking a beat. You're just an everyday police officer. So how did it
Yeah.
start evolving into a more aggressive, more lucrative style? Because like I said, I have some highlights of your career. I don't know the details, but I know you started getting into heavy undercover work.
Mm, yeah.
Is that kind of the evolution? Did you just kind of go from, your everyday
Um,
police and then it just kind of evolved into something? Or
yeah.
did
Great
you kind of
question.
find a program and go, I want that and then run after it? Or how'd that go?
Yeah, number two.
Okay.
I discovered that because I wanted to be this I wanted to be a super cop, or I
Nice.
wanted to be in a role that was exciting and where the adventure was. And I'm a huge Springsteen fan, and there's a great song that he wrote called Blinded by the Light, where it's Mama always said don't look into the sun, but that's where the fun is. So,
Yeah, for
you
sure.
know, I just wanted to do shit that was scary and was exciting and was at the sharp end. And working undercover, when I realized that there was an undercover section, because we didn't, we weren't taught that as young cops, that there were all these career paths. Which is probably a good thing for an undercover section that you don't know about it.
Yeah.
um, and I thought, fuck, I've got to get into that. And the thing was, coming from a GI and military based environment with short hair, and back in the 80s and 70s, nobody had short hair except cops in the military. So, working, and I have to admit it, as a young man, I thought, wow, if I can work in undercover, I can look however the hell I want. I can dress how I want. I can get into the exciting shit.
Yeah, those freedoms
So
are
yeah,
appealing.
oh, indeed, yeah. And I
Yeah.
pushed for it. It took me maybe 3 months to get some attention of anybody to get an interview.
Okay.
Um, and I was a pretty active young cop. By that time, I was in patrol. So, I'd walk the beat on foot, then I'd go into patrol, loved patrol. And there was a boss who obviously took me under his wing for some reason. I think I was a pretty good operator. And I spoke to him about it, and he said, "Okay, you need to understand that this is probably not what you think it's going to be, but I'll make a call for you." So he got me an interview, and then lo and behold, I don't know, a week or two later, I got a call to say, "Yep, you're accepted. Take some leave." Because again, you touched on it before. Cops didn't wear beards. The
Yeah.
only cops you'd see with beards, including plainclothesmen, were anybody with a medical condition that meant they couldn't shave. So it certainly didn't have long hair, certainly didn't have earrings, no beards, no tattoos. It was
Hmm.
just it was such a straight-laced decade, in policing. And you see cops now have got sleeve tattoos and beards and whatever.
Oh yeah.
But in those days, it was really an appealing thing. And the other thing was, I guess in hindsight, I wanted to test out what I was like,
Yeah.
and the way to really test yourself is to put yourself in situations where it's all going to go to shit.
Yeah, I mean
So
that's anybody who joins military special operations. Maybe not so much in the police department, but I'm sure you still get it over here in the U.S. because we have like the SWAT and the other undercover, and
yeah,
then you go with your three letter like your DEAs and your ATFs, and you see those getting some sticky situations. So I think anybody in a young
mm.
man's mindset, especially a highly intelligent, highly motivated individual, you're going to be drawn towards those programs 100%. So it
Oh
totally makes
yeah,
sense
well
that
yeah,
that is,
yeah,
the appealing of the freedoms, but with also like inviting in a little bit of that chaos to see what test your inner metal.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Exactly
absolutely.
right. Yeah, I like that inviting in the chaos because that was what I was after.
For sure.
And the
So,
thing,
oh, go ahead. Yeah.
go. Yeah, I was going to say the thing was though in those days, and I call them the Wild West days. There was no training course. I was
Okay.
a baby-faced little kid, and if you jump on my website, there's photos on there about um, what I looked like in those days, and I was a baby-faced little guy that was, and I was the one of the smallest in my intake. So I was never regarded or picked as a cop, which I loved, and that continued all through my career,
It probably helped you in
and I
your
quite
career.
like that too. Yeah, yeah, it did, yeah.
Yeah.
And so, uh, no training. I was thrown in with the current undercover to just shadow him and see how he spoke to people and what he did and how he operated. And our job was to buy drugs. So anything from weed to smack or heroin. Ice wasn't really existing in those days. Speed was, but it was a different manufacturing process than meth. So a lot of LSD, not a lot of cocaine, but certainly a lot of heroin, a lot of tablets, just bennies and all that sort of shit.
Yeah.
Um, and our job was to be on the street and buy drugs. And those drugs would be vouchered. You'd write records of the conversation, all that stuff, and have a chain of evidence. And then ultimately, at the end of a defined period, everyone that you'd bought drugs from would be arrested and charged with supply or trafficking. Um, and that was the intention of an undercover operation. But having no training and not understanding, so I'd never even had a beer. I didn't drink, I didn't smoke cigarettes, I was sure not done
And
any drugs.
you're an undercover
um
police officer, more or less in a narco unit, and you've never drank in a beer.
exactly right, yeah,
Gosh,
yeah,
that's
I probably
wild.
would have been a better undercover choir boy or something. um and it was funny, man, the first beer I've ever had, and I've written about this as well because I think it's hilarious. I had to meet an informer, who was a dude who lived in the world, not a cop, but worked with us.
Hmm.
And it turned out I did a few jobs with him. He turned out to be a really good guy, but frightened. He looked like a 6'5" Hell's Angel. He was just this big, fearsome guy. And I had to meet him in a pub. So I've rocked up to the pub, and I've like, Jesus, I'm probably I stood out like the proverbial, we call them dog's balls. When I walked into this pub, I was clearly a young kid trying to look like someone he wasn't, etc. And this guy, we'd never met, and he just picked me in one and went, "Yeah, come over here." And he sat down. He said, "Oh, phew, man, we've got to do some work with you." and, um, and he turned to the barman and said, "Two beers." And I said, "I don't drink, mate." And he said, "Well, you fucking do now. Two
Yeah,
beers." And
for sure.
and I think I had like a beer and a half, and I was all, woza. And then within 3 months, I'm drinking beer, I'm down in scotch, I'm smoking weed with bikers,
Yeah.
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean that's kind of I don't know what it's like. So is this when you're doing undercover, is it at this point anyways, you're saying you're buying stuff. So obviously setting up
Mm,
buys and it's kind of the walk in, the awkwardness, the chit chat, buy the drugs and walk
yeah,
out.
yeah, yeah.
But at this point, is there any like true infiltration going on, or is this just recording buys, collecting evidence, and creating evidence against certain people?
Yeah. Yeah, good. Again, great question. Initially, that's what it was because I really had to learn. I really had to learn how to work. Yeah.
Yeah,
So I'd be
you had to
introduced to a
criminalize
couple of.
yourself a little bit.
Yeah. Well, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. But see, there's the problem because it becomes really addictive.
Oh yeah,
To work in that
absolutely.
world, break the rules,
I
and just
bet.
not be who you really are. And that's where a couple of my friends went to the dark side. They just didn't know how to come back.
Yeah.
Um, but so, like, I did it for 2 years, and the first couple of jobs or operations, I'd be just doing street stuff, going to someone's house, being introduced, and really learning my shit. And then I developed a real knack for buying heroin, and I never used it. Unfortunately, a couple of my friends, fell to the needle,
Yeah.
which is another sad story. But I never used. My position was always, hey, I'm only a young guy, but I'm in this for the money, man. I don't touch this shit. Um, and that for some reason was more accepted by good dealers, the
Yeah.
dealers I was working on,
Well, I can see that being
than
appealing because you don't have to worry about the junkie problems, coming
bingo.
at you
Yeah,
with
yeah.
bad cash or nothing or begging
Yeah,
for stuff or
trying to rip
asking.
you off or
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. And it's the old adage, you can never trust a junkie, they'll steal from their grandmother.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
so so I think that was a real benefit. And because I developed this confidence, it took me a little while, but I developed this even though I'm a little guy, I had this air of menace, this don't fuck with me attitude. Um, and a lot of it was bravado, but I found as I went on, I just really lost a lot of the niceness that I had,
Yeah.
and I enjoyed being an asshole,
I was just
you
going to
know.
ask, did it start out of necessity, but then, you took to it and it just kind of became literally who you were?
Yeah, that's the problem with undercover.
That's
There's a
scary.
couple of
Yeah.
problems, yeah, with working undercover is the first is that you set out to befriend someone with the intention of betraying them.
Right.
Almost everybody you meet, you're going to betray them at some point. Even those in an operation where you're infiltrating, and an operation like that can go 6 months. And you meet people on the periphery who aren't bad dudes or bad women, and you're
Sure.
actually sort of friendly with them, but you're gonna fuck them up at some point,
What does that
you
do to
know.
you mentally? Like, how do you even handle something like that?
Well, it's a challenge. It's a challenge because at heart, I was still a nice guy,
For sure.
and
Yeah.
I think I still am.
But
um, but but it was like you just have to compartmentalize that stuff, and go, okay, well, it's not my issue, because in the back of my mind, even though I'm operating under another name, or with another backstory, I'm still a cop doing his job,
right.
and you really have to. It's hard to explain even all these years later. I would have to get into character every morning, whatever the name I was using, and particularly on a prolonged operation. I'd literally look in the mirror and go, "Okay, your name's Jim," or whatever name I was using, and then go, "Okay, off we go," because often I worked alone, and there no backup. So there were no ghost teams following me. You were just in those days. There were only five of us who were undercover guys, and we're all men, no women in those days.
Okay.
So, and we're all young kids, man. I was 22 when I started this stuff, and my friends were like 22, 23. I think the oldest might have been 25. So we're all young guys living on a prolonged operation by ourselves, no backup, and just living that world. I got very good at playing pool
Yeah.
because
I bet.
I'd hang in pubs a lot with dealers. Just play pool and just socialize. And a lot of undercover work can be socializing. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I much preferred the buys where it was just all business, where I'd go in and talk margin, profit margin, how many times I'm going to step on an ounce of smack, all that stuff, and go, right,
Is
I've
that
got a
just because
market.
of the emotional side of it wasn't there? So it was just pure business. It
Yeah,
allowed you to be a
yeah,
little bit more cutthroat.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And,
Okay.
and I'd negotiate sale prices and all that stuff because I could actually tell you off the top of my head what my profit margins were going to be, like any good dealer would.
Yeah.
And I much preferred that because it was like, in and out. Maybe 30, 40 minutes of conversation. Here's my money. Give me the
Yeah.
gear. I'm
Well,
gone.
you're a businessman
Um,
at that point. You're not cultivating
yeah,
relationships.
yeah. The other job, the other side of it, there were jobs. So particularly if I was living outside the city, all through Queensland. Queensland's a pretty big state. A lot of people in the US don't understand how big Australia is, and the
Hmm.
states are, I guess. So, just to backtrack a bit, if you think about the geographic size of the USA, Australia fits almost perfectly into that,
Right.
as in same square mileage or whatever.
Right.
Um, so Queensland would run, oh man, so if you think about the east coast of the US, whatever your border is with Canada, whatever the state is on the border with Canada, Queensland would probably run right down to Washington, I would
Dang.
think.
So it's like
Yeah,
over half, well
yeah,
over
big
half the
state.
coastal.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
massive. And
Massive.
you were traveling up and down this working?
Yeah, yeah. So operations, and the other thing was, unlike now, when an operation was finished, the bad guys would be told exactly who I was. So, they'd be dragged in. You've been selling drugs to an undercover cop. And not just that, but they'd use our real names.
Oh, for crying
These
out
days,
loud.
it's all assumed identity. Oh, yeah, it was just Wild West stuff. So then, if you decided that you wanted to was called being confronted with me as the undercover, they'd say, Do you want to see him in person to have all of these allegations laid out? Yeah, I do. So they'd parade me in, and I'd have to stand in front of you and say, okay, my name is Detective Keith Banks, real name. I met you on this occasion, that occasion, that occasion. You sold me heroin, blah, 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 blah. And then you'd be given the opportunity to make a response, and then I'd leave, which is all cool until you understand that now, shit, they all know my face.
Yeah.
So you'd have to change your appearance somehow. Like I went through stages. I'd have a false set of glasses. I streaked my hair because my hair used to be dark brown, so I'd streak it like a blonde color. I'd grow a goatee for one job, then I'd shave it off and have a big Mexican moustache, long hair, short hair, to try and just change appearance as much as possible.
Yeah. Every little
But
bit matters in that because I mean,
yeah,
in
yeah,
my head, case in point, like you get enough evidence on someone, but they don't go away for that long. There's a very
yeah,
high chance that they're like, that's the dude who got me last time.
and it happened a couple of
Oh
times.
no.
Yeah, so that's when you just learn to lie. You know, your adrenaline goes through the roof and your sphincter goes like that. And just
Yeah,
lie.
for sure.
Just lie, man. I mean, most of the time I had a gun, but there were times I didn't because the climate in Australia and Queensland was, like t-shirts and shorts. It was just too hot to wear
Yeah.
anything. And I used to carry a little 25 caliber Browning, so a little semi-automatic, I think 7 rounds in the mag, and a small little weapon, effective at close quarters, but you couldn't always carry it either.
Right.
So you just had to learn to talk your way out of stuff.
So speaking of that, what year was it that Australia kind of de-armed its civilian populace? When was that?
We're only talking about this a couple of days ago. I think it was 97.
Okay, so there was still a
So
couple of years. So back then there was still like, nowadays if there's a drug dealer, if they're not carrying
mm,
a weapon, it's like surprising, right? So back then was
yeah,
carrying a weapon a like a common thing, and so it sounds like you
um,
you had yours every now and then, but were they always carrying?
not always, no, but back in those days, so when the gun laws changed, prior to 19, I think it was 97, you could walk into a sports store and buy, or like you can in the US, you could buy a semi-automatic 30 round 223 55, so which is a 5.56,
Yeah,
or a 7.62, which is a 380, I think, civilian terms. You could buy semi-automatics, no problem. Pump action shotguns, no problem. Pretty much any caliber of firearm up till about that 7.62, I think. But no identification, no requirement. Anybody could buy anything.
okay.
So a lot of the guys that I dealt with had long arms, it was still unusual to see a handgun because they'd been completely illegal. Not that that ever stops anything. It was unusual to see them. Some bikers had handguns, but generally they'd have, a shotgun sitting in the corner or in the car, or like a Mini 14 Ruger in the
Okay.
in the back seat of the car. So
Yeah.
always at arm's reach. Sometimes I had a shotgun sitting in my car when I'd meet someone, but I generally prefer just have a handgun, just like down my underpants or something, or down my boot, just so I could just give me a sense of comfort.
Yeah.
But a lot of undercover is talking your way out of shit.
Yeah. And at this point, like, were they wiring you too? Like, did you have,
Sometimes, yeah,
okay. So,
yeah.
and I know a lot of this is going to be job specific, case specific, and all that, but I'm curious because,
Mm,
over the years, things have gotten so crazy. Like, wires are kind of a thing of the past, but, or they're so concealed that, unless you're swept and all that. But back then, I mean, you're having like
yeah,
real recordings and they're not
yeah,
transmitting signals back and
yeah.
forth, or
All
if
of
they
that,
are, it's
yeah,
very, very close, So
yeah,
that's
yeah.
an
So,
interesting
so there
world to
were
live in.
Yeah, there were two things. So generally on what we call a buy bust. So, you'd set up a major drug buy with, oh God, I don't know, let's make say a pound of heroin or something, or maybe half a pound of heroin, and you'd have the surveillance team around, and
Mhm.
that's when you'd be wired so that you could give a code phrase, and they'd come in like the cavalry.
Okay.
Okay, maybe three times out of five it didn't work. So because the equipment was crap. And
Yeah.
so you'd be giving the code word going, okay, where are these guys? Now I just got to figure out how to keep this guy here for the next 5 minutes because surely they'll turn up. Yeah, and that had happened. Um, and the other thing was to record a conversation on tape. And again, this is the 80s, so the
Mhm.
technology wasn't all that great. You'd often have like a little pearl quarter, we call them, like stuffed down your underpants or
Right.
taped to the small of your back with a microphone running up, sort
Right.
of just sitting under here, and you'd have to be careful not to move too much because it'd rustle your clothing and all that sort of stuff.
For sure.
Um, Never happened to me, but a friend of mine was sitting in a drug deal and there was an audible click because he'd
Oh.
been there too long and the thing had clicked off. You know,
Oh my gosh. And did that give
that's
them did
when.
that give them away and did
Well,
they
no.
hem them
See,
up?
what you learn is to take the offensive step. So what he did was, well, what the fuck is that? Who the fuck? What the fuck's going on here? And just did
Yeah,
the whole.
okay.
And he went,
Yeah.
"Fuck you guys, I'm out." Hey,
Counter
and they're going,
accuse
"No, come
deny.
back, come back." Yeah, yeah, yeah. So there's like hundreds of stories like that where, and again, remember, we're only kids. We were 23 and 24 years old.
Yeah.
So we're living in that lifestyle on the edge. And now that I understand hypervigilance, I look back then and think, well, we were more affected by this than we ever thought we were. Um, but it was a rush. And,
Yeah,
and therein lies the problem. When it's a rush, it's hard to give it up.
for sure. Now at this point, the criminals, the drug dealers you're going after, is there a constant sense of worry? Like, are they always on edge thinking they're gonna get busted? Or is okay,
Oh, yeah.
so
Yeah.
they know they have heat on them no matter what.
They know there are undercovers, and they used to. And I remember I was told by a guy, there's probably he said to me in all seriousness, you've got to be careful of undercovers, right? I went, undercovers, like, yeah, like what? And he said, oh man, there's undercovers everywhere. There's like about 150 of them in the whole state. And I thought to myself, well, there's only five of us, but
Yeah.
I get your point.
That's how you know you're doing a damn
um,
good job if they think there's 150 of you guys.
that's right. That's right. But see, that's where a couple of my friends fell foul of the needle because they were in situations they thought they had to use to
Right.
show that they weren't cops,
Loyalties
and
or yeah.
yeah, that ended up tragically for them.
Yeah.
Um, so you just I don't know, man. There was a whole sense of paranoia, not
Mhm.
just from them but from us as well. And as an undercover cop, you're paranoid, and I don't, you know, I guess my paranoia wasn't as much as getting recognized or getting blown. It was getting ripped off, because
Interesting.
we had some murders in the drug world where guys were ripped and they were shot and bashed. So I'd be on that paranoia thing Okay, what's the body language? Am I getting lured in somewhere it's going to be easy to rip me off? Do I have my gun
Yeah.
with me? Don't I? If I don't, what am I going to do? Combined with, okay, have I said the right things? Is he suspicious of me? Does he think I'm a cop? Has someone told him I'm a cop? Because back in those days as well, we had a real problem with corruption.
Okay.
Um, and there had been times where you'd walk into, not me specifically, but friends of mine walked into an area and the guys have gone, we know you're a cop.
Oh, dang.
You know? Yeah. And I was like, yeah, do I stand and argue it or do I just go, well, I'm out of here? Um, because the jobs have been sold out by corrupt police.
Oh,
You
man.
know,
Okay.
so it was a real tightrope. I'm walking a tightrope every day.
And how long did you
And
do this for?
2 years.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's like nonstop for 2 years.
I think I took some vacation time, maybe halfway through for maybe 3 or 4 weeks.
Right.
Um,
But I mean, in retrospect, I mean, 3 weeks is a drop in the bucket compared to
no,
two
yeah,
years. I mean, and you're operating at a very, very high level. Like you're talking about mentally, you're thinking about two different worlds at the same
yeah,
time while operating
yeah.
in a very dangerous environment.
And also lying to people that you know. So I was a martial artist, I still am. So I was training in Taekwondo then, and the dojo for whatever it's called in Korea. Um, the people there knew I was a cop. So I went in one night and said, "Hey, just got to say, I've been fired from the department. They found weed in my locker." And I remember these other friends of mine went, "You? No." And I went, yeah, mate. So I still trained. I went back and still trained. I did my first degree black belt when I was undercover, and all of them except my instructor thought that I was a disgraced ex-cop. Um,
Oh,
and I brought him in on a secret because I had to be able to trust somebody. And
sure.
uh, and when I left undercover, I went back to uniform for 6 months because we had to go back for discipline, as much as we hated it. um, and I rolled in there one night on patrol in my uniform, and he said, "Okay, just wait a sec." And he went inside, got the whole class to stand up, and then brought me in and said, "Hey, this is what Keith's been doing for the last 2 years," which is very cool, of him to
Yeah,
do that, and very cool of him to go, "Wow." So you've got all of that stuff, man. You're dealing with drug dealers, you're maintaining your cover with that, remembering your backstory,
hmm,
remembering the lies you've told them, dealing with the paranoia from within the department from some corrupt cops,
right.
dealing with the whole relationship and family. But my family, my mother she was like 1,000 miles north, so I never saw her. Well, I hardly saw her. Um,
What about like
but
friends
dealing with
and
all that,
like friends and intimate relationships? That had to have been
no,
incredibly just not going to happen.
yes, not going to happen. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I bet.
Um, and you meet women. And I was a young guy, and I'd meet women in that world under another name,
Right.
and then you've got to weigh up, are they connected with this? If I do go down that path for a quick brief relationship, is it going to impact on the operation? So and all of that stuff's a lot to carry at that age, for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, you're in your early 20s, mid 20s, you know,
Yeah.
that's I still hadn't you couldn't trust me with $100 bill at that age, you know.
Well, there was, and yet the science says that the male brain doesn't mature till around 26. And we did some stupid shit too, like the undercovers, the only guys I really trusted were the other undercovers.
Okay.
So when we could, we'd socialize together. So, you'd have sort of 3 or 4 or 5 guys with long hair and beards and whatever going out and drinking like, sailors on shore leave, and
For
uh,
sure.
and we're all armed, drinking, smoking weed in the car park. It's just, and I look back on those days and go, wow, fuck.
Well,
But it was like blowing off steam as well.
that's what I was just gonna say. I mean, you got to be able to keep your edge, and in that world, like
Mm,
you drop it, and I'm sure it can, just like in the military, if you're not paying attention, you could have
mm,
catastrophic results. So,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't think anyone's judging you for having some beers and smoking some weed at age 24, 25. You know? Like, were you
Well,
ever,
apart from the fact it was against the law, I guess. But
yeah, right. Were you ever able to work hand in hand with another undercover so that you at least had a
yeah, did
buddy
a couple of
during the
jobs.
situation?
Yeah, yeah.
Did
It
that
was
change things
certain
up a
jobs,
little?
yes. Yeah, it did because you could actually breathe.
Yeah,
If you're out of town on an op with another UC, you've got someone that you can just relax with.
I bet.
So that made a lot of difference. Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
and it just depended on the job.
And so 2 years this goes on, minimal amounts of
Mm.
personal time. How many years into your career are you now?
So I was sworn as an officer at 19. So by the time I finished this, it would have been 5 years, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah, 5 years.
And I mean,
Yep.
you've already experienced so much, but you look at least in my opinion, I'm not a police officer. I don't come from an officer's background, but
Mm.
5 years in, you're getting your feet set. You're in a leadership role, but you're not considered like a seasoned veteran of the force at any
No.
point. And 5 years in, I mean, you're already done years of undercover work. You've put drug dealers behind bars, worked on your own the whole time. Like, so
Mm.
how does the next step even happen? Like, how do you just
Well,
go from such a high-paced atmosphere and so
yeah.
much happening in such a quick time to, transitioning into whatever the next move looked like?
Well, I went back to patrol because I'd had enough of undercover, and I realised and what you just said is absolutely right, because it didn't count towards promotion or it didn't count towards recognition.
Oh,
Um, Undercovers were regarded as like expendable, you know.
it's
So I just went, 2 years is enough. I've learned my, I've had my stuff. I was thinking maybe, being at the sharp end, I can go back to patrol and get back into the fun of patrol. And the thing was, as much as I loved patrol before I went undercover, I now found it boring. It just
okay.
didn't have the same rush. So I walked away from undercover with this huge adrenaline addiction,
Yeah.
and yeah, I'm sure you understand it. And so back in patrol, then I wanted to be a detective. So I think it was about 6 months. I applied for detective training, and I was accepted as a trainee detective. Then went on a crime, what we call a crime investigation course, and did all that. But in the meantime, um, I looked at our part-time special weapons unit and went, okay, I think that may have my number on it
Yeah.
because again, needed to be at the sharp end. So back in those days, it was a part-time gig, so you're either patrol or detective, you were a part-time operator. So I applied for it, went through the interview process, got accepted as a trainee for that. Then we had our training course at a military establishment in Queensland, Battle Wing, where everyone who deployed overseas in the military had gone through their training there.
Okay.
And so we were trained there, and we were trained there by the SAS, because
High
around that
level.
time, yeah, high level, yeah, close quarter battle,
Hmm.
breaching, all of that stuff. Um, and that was my first exposure to a Heckler and Koch submachine gun and an Uzi and all the fun stuff.
Oh
And
yeah.
so loved all of that. And I did that part time for 5 years, I think. And then we developed a full time capability, and I was asked to be one of the first full time guys in the tactical world in
Nice.
Queensland. So that's the short version.
Right.
Otherwise, I'll talk about guns all day.
Yeah. So are guns still a huge passion of yours?
Oh, look, they were a tool of the trade. I
Hmm.
don't shoot anymore, but
Okay.
I certainly, like, I mean, it's difficult here to get onto a range. I'd have to go through a
Yeah,
whole application process to have a handgun, shoot with a club, and it's just not my thing.
for
If they're
sure.
not drop targets and combat shooting, it's not my thing.
Right.
Um, but I certainly was pretty handy with them. Yeah.
And during this time are you looking for firearms then and trying to take them off the streets, or what is the kind of
Um,
wave tops of what was your job detail during that period?
so as an operator, we were initially domestic sieges and high risk raids. So
It
again,
sounds a lot
before the
like our
gun,
SWAT teams.
yeah, exactly right. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, with a counter-terrorist responsibility as well,
Okay.
because there was no federal. response unit, so it was all state by state. So
Gotcha.
our responsibility, yeah, domestic sieges, high risk raids, any terrorist activity, we would have been the first line of response.
Hmm.
Then the handover would have occurred with our counter-terrorist military, so the Special Air Service then, which is now a combination of Special Air Service and Two Commando. Um, so we were really, yeah, the forerunners of all of that. And in the 80s, when we took over the CT, or the CT responsibility was given to the state tactical teams, that was around the time of aircraft hijack. You know, the Bader-Meinhof were hijacking planes around the world, the PLO, the Red Brigades, all of those 80s terrorist groups. So a lot of our stuff was learning how to plan and execute raids, save the hostage, kill the terrorist, which is interesting because from a civilian or a law enforcement perspective, your rules of engagement are that you can't use deadly force unless you're in reasonable apprehension of death yourself. So in other words, to save your life or to
Right.
save the life of another. And yet we're being taught by the SAS to go into a stronghold and just go tap, 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 take all
Right.
these guys out. So then your muscle memory in a real job goes, oh, I can't do that. So yeah, it's become incredibly improved nowadays. But again, it was like pioneering stuff. So it was just a
Right.
ton of fun. And
Yeah.
really, I said this on a podcast a while ago, and I said there's, in those days there was nothing more exciting, exhilarating than to crack a door in at 3 a.m. looking for an armed robber and
Yeah.
then put a heckler and kosh in his face as a little bit of payback and just say, and I won't use the word I use, but wake up, C, the word starting with C, wake up.
Oh, you
And
could
there's a
drop it
guy
on yours.
jump.
That's one of
Oh, can
my
I?
well, because people got to understand the word cunt in Australia means a
Yeah.
thousand different things differently than
Yeah,
the
it
word
does. Yeah.
cunt here in the US. There's only one meaning here, and it's very
Yeah.
derogatory, and everyone hates it. But that was one of the the big things I always laugh at when I'm talking with Troy, or now getting to talk to
Yeah.
you, and when I had Aussies come up and they were working at my commands overseas.
Yeah.
Like a good cunt is a good thing. That's like
That's right. Yeah, it
that's my
is.
bro.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah. Yeah.
and then,
Yeah.
on the
Yeah.
flip side, if they're like, oh, he's a shit cunt or he's a bad cunt or whatever, that's like, oh, he's kind of,
You're all over it.
he's a motherfucker. Don't listen to him. Like, so, dude,
Yeah.
drop
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
at
You're
will
all
up
over it.
here. People will either get over it
So
or they won't.
yeah, no, yeah, I appreciate that. Thanks, mate.
Yeah.
Because in context, it was all, like these sort of maggots would race into a bank and point a gun in the face of a 19-year-old girl, and be really tough, brave guys.
Yeah.
When we came in and suddenly crash bash, and I'd be in their weapon to their face and say, "Wake up, cunt,"
Yeah.
and just we'd take delight in watching these guys piss their pants. So, so not long after whatever, it was a local podcast here with an Aussie ADF guy and an American, a retired US Navy SEAL, jumped on my Instagram and said, "Wake up, cunt should be on every T-shirt around the world."
Yeah. But
So,
I don't know if that fits into your current, motivational, thing, but
yeah,
if you
a
put one
little
up
bit
there on your
rough. Yeah,
website, it would sell.
I reckon I would. Um, but see, that was like that was exciting. It
I was just
was
gonna say, so you had
whilst
opened the
we
door and
were,
let the chaos back in, and you're
yeah,
running and
exactly, yeah,
gunning and
and
just enjoying it.
running out, yeah, loving it. So I was flying around the country as I progressed through the tactical team in that part-time role. Flown around the country doing training courses with various tactical units, and I did my EOD course in 1986 with the Army. And as you'd probably know, because I know you have an EOD background,
Hmm.
in order to learn how to dismantle IEDs, and we were taught how to hand enter and dismantle them. Like fuck that.
Yeah.
Um, you actually you actually have to know how to make them. So there I was. I spent 4 weeks on an army base in a place called Bandiana, which is on the border of New South Wales and Victoria, and 4 weeks learning how to make shit and blow shit up and
Yeah.
make shape charges and just having all this fun and getting paid for it. It was just, yeah, exciting shit.
And is this at year five of the tactical side of things?
Um, yeah, it was 96, so it would have been probably the fourth year, sorry, 86, the fourth year that I'd been in the team,
Okay.
maybe
And
around there.
and so
But,
once you get the explosive certifications, does your job title change? Like for me,
no, no,
oh, okay. So it's
yeah,
just like a
no, no. So
specialty within the same team?
yeah, yeah,
Gotcha.
just especially within the team. So, to justify making us a full-time unit in those days, we added the bomb response to our special weapons response.
For sure.
So, we had a team of guys who were EOD specialists. So we get called to suspicious devices and all that stuff, to sort of justify the manpower.
Hmm.
And I enjoyed it, but my thing was, assaulting. I
Yeah.
was an assaulter, so H&K MP5 SD, was my favorite gun. Um, and we did a lot of high risk work, and then so I was a detective. I was appointed detective by then, and I was tapped on the shoulder by the boss of the newly formed tactical area to go, hey, you want to come on board and be one of the full time guys? And I went, let me think about it. Okay.
Yeah.
So so I jumped in on that. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And during this period, I mean, it sounds like you got quite a bit of, kinetic work done.
mm.
Did you ever get shot or have any major injuries or did
No,
you
mate, that's an incident where, this is really, I'm going to tell you something now that really pushed me over the edge into PTSD for like, or survivor guilt, I understand now, for
okay.
30 years. Um, we'd executed hundreds of jobs. And in a law enforcement tactical world, the element of surprise, speed, aggression, all of that stuff
Yeah,
is
absolutely.
utilized. And we'd never fired around, never had to
Yeah.
fire around.
That's not uncommon.
Um, yeah, yeah, and I think it's a sign of a good operation.
Yeah, well planned,
But
well executed. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, so I'd been sent to train with the SAS in Perth, and this was 1987, and I was over there for 4 weeks, so I came back as a qualified counter-terrorist instructor, blah blah blah, and then about 4 weeks after I got back, we were tasked with an operation to execute a search warrant for an armed robber, who was the number one most wanted in Queensland, psychopathic motherfucker. He'd been on the run. He'd escaped from jail, I think 7 years before, or maybe longer than that. I can't remember specifically. Might have been 7 years. But he'd been in jail in New South Wales for armed robbery. He'd escaped. He bashed a guy who was a tradesman, like a contractor who'd come to the jail, bashed him with his hammer and broke his skull, and then escaped with another
Jeez.
murderous prick. Since that time, he'd been committing armed holdups all around Western Australia, South Australia, and Queensland. He'd shot a couple of guys in cold blood who were just unarmed security guards, just because he felt like it.
Yeah.
And so he'd been in Brisbane doing a number of armed robberies. So he'd committed an armed robbery and he was tackled by young guys who was running out of this credit union, we call them, and don't know what the equivalent is over there, but sort of, a bank.
Yeah,
Um,
we have credit
but
unions as well.
yeah, so it was about 30 grand or something, and this is 1987, so $30,000 was a lot of money.
Hmm.
Um, and they tussled over it, and the offender got away with his Mini 14 Ruger, so a 5.56 caliber 30 round mag that he always carried. Um, and because he was about 5'6", I think maybe 5'6.5", so a little dude, ex-army, very, very good marksman and survival skills and all that stuff. So he was living in a house in a suburb in Brisbane, and we were happily at work minding our own business, and got a call out to go, okay, we need to prepare for an operation on this house. So surveillance. So they found out that he was living there through the witness. He threatened the witness, and so on. So it's a bit of a long story, but to cut a long story short, we were deployed. Okay, so we were told to mount an operation order, to effect an arrest. So we sat over the course of 2 days and looked at all the options. Whether we did a direct entry on the house, whether we had surveillance on him, took him out in traffic, or took him out when he was walking, or vehicle intercepts, all that stuff. And we had to discount all of them because, given his past, he would have opened fire.
Hmm.
And, opening fire in a public place, those rounds travel a long way. And, there's a real danger of the public being killed or
Yeah,
wounded.
absolutely.
So all we could come up with, and we had to, was, house entry. And we'd done hundreds of these before. And the problem that we had was I just finished, said the SAS course. I absolutely knew what I was doing. So with a sergeant, I had two stripes, so a senior constable in those days. We sat and worked out this deliberate option or deliberate action order. And as in the military, it covers everything. So you type every contingency, all of that. And I put in there that I wanted to use tear gas and I wanted to use stun grenades, flashbangs. Yeah. Um, my sergeant took it into police headquarters, and he came back about 3 hours later. He said, oh, bad news, mate. They're not going to let us use tear gas. They're not going to let us use flashbangs.
What was the thought
Um,
process about saying no? Did you ever find out?
well, I have my theories.
Yeah.
And the guy who was in command, who sat in an ivory tower,
Yeah.
we have a word for them. We call them shiny asses. Um, he would have looked at stun grenades or flashbangs and thought, it's a frag. And rather than ask the question, has gone a blanket no. So,
Yeah. He didn't even know what he was
problem.
talking about. He just,
Didn't know what he was talking
oh
about. Yeah.
man.
And there were kids, there were two little kids in the house. So, but tear gas can be delivered. I wanted it delivered into the bedroom where this guy was sleeping because we're going to hit him at like 4 a.m.
Hmm.
Wake up, cunt.
Yeah.
Um,
Perfect.
and my plan was to have a distraction, pump in gas, crash in, use flashbangs, which would put him down, enable us to take him without a shot. So we were told we couldn't do that. We were told we couldn't use tear gas because there was a risk to the kids, which is bullshit because they were
Yeah.
another part of the house. But again, rather than ask the question.
Well, even the
So the
risk
only
is
thing,
it's not life-threatening risk. It's you know,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
dang.
Well, the thing is, mate, at that time, this was the week that our corruption inquiry had started. So there was a major corruption inquiry, right?
Oh, so
That was
tensions are
hitting the
just high
media.
no matter what, and like nothing can go wrong.
Fuck yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I think it's worse than that. I think they because the media, the headlines were all about the corruption inquiry because the commissioner of police had been called first, and he eventually went to jail for corruption.
Oh boy.
Because we had this real cohort of corrupt motherfuckers, yeah, and the publicity wasn't great. So I still believe that those in charge wanted a headline to take attention away from the corruption inquiry.
Gotcha.
So and they've got the headliner right, but it wasn't what
Yeah.
they were after. So so we were told when to hit this place, which again was unusual. We normally chose our own rules of engagement or our own time of execution. So here we are. We're going right. We're not allowed to use what we want to use. We're being told when to go in, and um, and our equipment, our ballistic vests were shit in those days. They were a level 2, so they were designed to stop a handgun or a shotgun. That was it.
Yeah.
This guy was armed with a 223,
Yeah.
and so we rehearsed it, we planned it, we went through it time and time and time and time again. And I instructed a team to stand outside this guy's bedroom because I couldn't use anything else to distract because you always need a distraction or a diversion.
Big time.
So my instructions were, look, we're going to try and make covert entry. If we can't, we're going to have to hammer the door in. As soon as you hear the hammer on the back door, throw a ladder through his bedroom window to make him believe you're coming up there. And that should distract him
There you go.
momentarily.
Sure.
So we got there. That's the plan. So I've given them the command to hammer the door. And within the first smash of the door, they've done what they're supposed to do at the front of the house and thrown a ladder through his bedroom window. He's out of bed. This is like 5 a.m. He's out of bed immediately in 2 rounds straight through the skirting board of the floor where you'd expect a team to be coming up the ladder. And it's on. So, we went in and the order of march as the team leader, I had to be number 4. That's just the rules. And the guy who was number 1 in the team, fuck, man, Peter, I had it in my gut. I knew that something was going to go wrong with this thing. You just get a gut feeling. And Peter was the only one of us who was married, and I didn't want to have him on the job for that reason.
Yeah.
And he was the first full timer with me. and he fought and argued and fought and argued, and I didn't want him on the job at all because I just thought, fuck, it's going to go to shit. And anyway, um, and he was a great operator. The guy was probably better operator than I was, I reckon, and I was pretty good.
Yeah.
So I said, look, we've got to go. We've got to have a shoot, just to get your eye in and whatever the day before the raid. And I was a bit arrogant, and I said, look, if you can outshoot me, I'll put you in the team. Frick outshot me. So, um, and yeah,
That's how you
and
you handle disputes, you know.
yeah, and so we went in, and it's on, and Peter, as Peter pushed through, and it was pitch dark, and in those days we only had little mini mag lights in our weapons, so the weapon systems now are much better.
Right.
Um, in He pushed open the bedroom door, where we have to yell, "Police, don't move, police, police." So this guy opened up on him and shot him 4 times in the chest, and once through the wrist. And you got to picture, this was a tiny bedroom. It's pitch black. There's fucking gunfire. I saw Pete get hit as he's pushing open the door. His number two, the force of the rounds had sort of knocked Pete into him, so they both fell.
Right.
Number three, who was my best friend, who I worked with and lived with and drank with, who was an ex-undercover as well. He's number three, and he got hit below the vest, point blank, and the round pushed him back into the corridor. And as this is on, the assault team leader from number two team, who were tasked to look after the kids in the rear room, jumped across and started engaging the offender. And so he engaged him, I engaged him, then the job's all over, right? And
Right.
the offender was killed. And that's just the way it goes. And then in this room, as the offender's down and he's fucked, Peter was in the corner screaming in pain and agony, and so I tore his whole. We wore the vests under our black jumpsuits in those days, so I remember tearing the jumpsuit open and saw the 4 fucking rounds and went, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
But I was in a state of disbelief as well. I just thought, okay, he's been hit 4 times, but he'll be okay because we'll have the paramedics here shortly. And as we're waiting for that, my other friend in the corridor, who'd been hit, I could hear him screaming in pain as well. It was just like a whole fucking clusterfuck.
That's a nightmare.
And it was a nightmare, yeah. And I don't remember how long it was before the paramedics arrived, but they arrived. I think they were pretty quick. And I was holding Peter's hand, and and just the fucking screaming in agony, man, was horrible. So squeezed his hand, went out to the ambulance, and he and Steve were being loaded in, and I just said, I'll see you in hospital, man. I'll be there in a couple of hours. Last time I saw him, he died about an hour and a half after that, I think. And I just went into this whole dark morass.
I bet.
I blamed myself for not pushing back on bullshit directives. I blame myself for not zigging when I should have zagged. I blame myself for agreeing to have him in the team. All of that stuff I know now, all these years later, is completely erroneous.
Yeah.
But at that time, that just really, really sent me fucking spiraling. And it came out as, and we all know the symptoms of PTSD now, but in those days, no one knew what it was. And it manifested itself in anger and way amounts of alcohol and sleeplessness and hypervigilance and more fucking anger. And about 4 or 5 weeks later, I was sitting at home, and we had permission to carry our firearms all the time because there was a threat on our lives. The guy that this offender the girl woman was living with was in the criminal world. And there was credible intelligence that she had put a contract out on us. So,
oh, wow.
For 2 years, I carried my firearm off duty. But it was about 4 or 5 weeks later, I was sitting at home. I probably consumed, God, 2/3 of a bottle of scotch like I was doing every night.
Yeah.
And just chambered around and put it in my mouth. And just thought, all I got to do is squeeze the trigger and it's all fucking over. All the pain's gone. And the reason I didn't was not self-preservation, and it was because the woman I was living with, who later became my first wife, worked in the advertising world, and I remember thinking, "Oh, Jesus, it's right up." I had a thought about a suicide I'd gone to, where this guy took the top of his head off with a high-powered rifle,
Hmm.
and I remember sitting there, so I had this thing in my mouth, and I'm thinking, "Shit, if I squeeze the trigger, she's going to come home and find my brain matter all over the wall, and
Yeah.
that'll really fuck her up, you know."
Hmm.
And then I took it out and thought, "Holy fuck, I've got some problems." So, unloaded it, stripped it, woke up the next morning and thought, fuck, but no one to talk to,
Yeah.
no one to confide in, because I knew full well that if I did, they'd take me out of the team, and rightly so.
Right.
But I would have lost my whole sense of purpose and my whole sense of team and my whole sense of being. So then I just disguised it, for like fucking years.
Yeah. And this is a huge, huge thing. It's finally getting addressed. I don't know
Mm,
if I can say adequately, but it's very much so public and being addressed now in the military. And
yeah.
the law enforcement and first responders who go through something traumatic like that, you're not going to be
Mm,
taken off your team right away. You're actually given options. It's still a stigma that people feel like, oh, they'll take me off and that's
yeah.
all I have left. But back then that was absolutely true. And
Yeah, yeah,
nowadays
absolutely, man. Yeah.
there's options to go through
Mm,
counselings and to have people talk. There are
mm,
options now, which is a huge godsend because, like you said, and I want to hear more, but like you said, you had to fake it for a couple years.
yeah,
That's a huge burden to have on you, and then to keep operating. But I
yeah,
totally get it because that becomes your purpose. That one thing
yeah,
you have left, you can't let it go because that's the last thing that's you.
yeah. Exactly right, mate. Yeah, and it's so good to talk to someone who understands it. But I got really vengeful and homicidal as well. I wanted to kill motherfuckers.
Yeah.
Doesn't take a shrink to figure out why. Um,
Yeah.
so I didn't take vacation or anything. I stayed on. I volunteered for every job or pushed my way into every job I could where there was a
Yeah.
potential for gunplay. Um, there were, went to an incident, and again, we were executing jobs, no shots fired, but the difference with me then was that I was disappointed
Yeah.
rather than happy that the job went well without gunplay. And I went to a siege about a year later, and this guy was shot. We went in, bang, he was shot. Um, but before we went in, and this time we're allowed to pump in gas. Funny about that. And this time our vests had been replaced because they suddenly found the budget to give us decent vests, and that fucking pisses me off. But
Yeah. In the face of
even these
tragedy,
years
things
later, it
get
still makes me angry.
miraculously appear.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And there's a
Yeah.
sense that's moral injury, man. There's a sense of betrayal right there. Um, but I remember standing. So this guy was on a second floor unit, I think, and I was stacked in the stairwell with my other assault team guys, and he'd fired, oh God, 20 or 30 rounds over the siege. And as we're standing there, he starts firing shots at the cops outside again. And I just turned to the guy beside me and said, I'm going to get in there and kill this prick. And just, I think back on it and go, I just turned into this guy who just wanted to blow heads off.
Yeah.
Um, because as a cop, that's not a good mindset to have. You still have your rules where you only use lethal force as the absolute last resort. And
Right.
I'd made my mind up, I'm going to go in there and kill him.
So we have
Unfortunately,
a kind of
I
like a
didn't.
color code complex, or it's a
Mm,
continuum. And in a very, very stressful situation, you want to stay calm, and there's all these, yellows to
mm,
orange to red.
mm,
But it's when you
yeah,
get in the black, you can get to your yellows and oranges, and that's where you want to be. Red, you start to lose it a little bit, but black is more or less subconscious doing. And it
yeah,
sounds like, that's where you were at. You're like, you know what? I can handle this. And it's more of a black reaction in your brain that
yeah,
it's like, just let me at him. Just an
yeah,
absolute dogfight at that point.
yeah. And that scared me. I remember I woke up the next morning after all this is over and thought, fuck,
Yeah.
I've turned into something because I'm convinced everyone has a dark side.
Oh, yeah.
Doesn't matter who you are,
Yeah.
the Pope, don't know. Um,
Yeah,
Everyone
for
has a
sure.
dark side, but mine was taking me over. Mine
Yeah.
was mine was pushing the normal me out, and that's when I gave it some thought, and I went, oh man, I got to go, I got to leave this thing I love before I become something that'll probably put me in jail.
Are you a religious man at all?
No,
Okay.
no, that went a long time ago.
Yeah.
Um, it's just part and parcel of seeing shit as a cop, I think.
Yeah, and
Um,
I totally understand that and absolutely respect it. But when I hear those stories, that's always the first thing in my mind because I kind of did the opposite. The things I
mm,
saw in service and the things I was able to do actually pushed me towards God. And so
right,
when I
right,
hear these stories and you feel the darkness taking over you, there's so much representation that I hear that are very similar
mm,
within spiritual and non-spiritual people. It's kind of crazy that we can all be on the same playing field, even if we don't
mm.
believe in the same things, if we have totally different aspects of spirituality or, and all those aspects. But,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
good for you for recognizing that the darkness was seizing you.
yeah.
That's
Thank you.
very,
Yeah,
very, very hard to do.
yeah. It was tough.
I
Yeah, it was
bet.
tough.
Was
And I
that the
guess,
moment, that shootout that you were talking? And I kind of cut you off too.
mm,
Did they let you
you're
go
right.
in the building when you were, when you looked to the guy next to you and you said, "Hey, let me at this
Yeah,
guy."
yeah, yeah, yeah,
They
yeah.
let you
I was
go.
in the assault. Yeah, yeah. It was my assault team. Yeah,
Okay.
for
And
sure.
you guys went in
Um,
and did you neutralize him?
Someone else did.
Okay.
Yeah,
So you,
yeah.
you kind of got
Thankfully,
your dopamine hit with
thankfully,
your
it wasn't me.
gunfight. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But
Um,
then, there was another, and there were others. It was another 6 or 8 months before I left the team, I guess. And there were some other horrible things. I went to a scene where a cop had been shot, murdered by a guy with a high-powered rifle, and we went in looking for this guy. And again, this reinforced my decision was the right one because um, it was a domestic dispute. This guy's ex-wife had turned up with their little girl, and there was an argument. She turned up with her new partner. She was running when this guy fired at her and hit her through the back, and the round went through her back and killed their daughter. And it was just fucking horrible.
that is
Um,
terrible.
and these two young detectives turned up, and this guy opened up on and killed one. The round grazed the head of the second one. And my team, again, just, I'm probably a ship magnet. There's another story I'll tell you soon. But, we happened to be in the area, called out, responded, blah, blah, blah. And it's still the case that if one of your law enforcement people are murdered, whether you know them or not, that's just there's some rules that the bad guys started the game, really.
Yeah. Yep.
And and there was negotiation going on with him, and we were stacked at the back. So again, it was like a ground floor and a top floor unit. So we were stacked at the rear of the unit. There was a little baby, like about an 18-month old kid crawling around the kitchen. So we covertly got in. Two of my guys went in, rescued the little kid, and brought him out. And then there was, more shouting, a gunshot, and whatever. And I just said to my guys, "Fuck this, we're going in." And we had a conversation, and I have to be very careful what I say, even legally, all these years later. But essentially, it
Sure.
was we're going in, and he's not coming out
Yeah.
if we get the chance. Yeah.
Yep.
So up we go. And this is where the black humor of policing is fucking gold. So we're going up, we're covering the stairs, we're going up. I see a pair of shoes or boots, like, toes up. So, fuck. So I thought, yeah, here we go. We Cricky shot himself. And we go up there, yeah, he shot himself, right?
Yeah.
And again, that's where my darkness was coming at, because I really wanted to get in there and kill him.
Yeah. I bet.
Um, One of the guys that I was with, ironically, Steve, who'd been badly wounded in the gunfight that I was in, that I spoke about before, who'd
Hmm.
recovered, thank God.
Oh yeah.
Um, he was on my assault team, and in those days there was a cartoon advertisement on television for a what was called a Reach toothbrush. So bear with me in this one.
Okay.
So the Reach toothbrush, the cartoon character goes, and he had a flip top head. So his head would go back so he could clean his rear teeth, right? And the ad caption was, if you don't have a flip top head, you need a Reach toothbrush. Yeah.
Okay.
So you got to picture it. We've gone up. This guy, the top of his head's gone. There's brain all over the place, bits of his skull. We're walking through that, clearing the rest of it, come back. So Steve looks at him and goes, ah. this cunt won't need a reach toothbrush because he's already got the flip top in, which is just fucking hilarious.
Yeah. That,
Um,
but to have that humor in the moment, and I mean, especially him,
yeah,
I
but
mean,
yeah,
he
to
he
have
had
that,
taken around, so I mean, he had probably changed a great deal.
yeah,
So I mean, you guys
yeah,
were both on the same level now, where it's like,
yeah,
you were kind of frustrated you didn't get to pull the trigger, and he's making jokes
mm,
about a toothbrush,
yeah,
like,
that's right.
yeah.
And that's that was the last heavy job I did because then
Yeah.
I left and went back into the world of covert intel and surveillance um, for a couple of years. And
And now I know you have a couple crazy decorations in your
yeah,
policing career. Did that happen during this time when you were doing all these raids?
I was decorated later after the gun battle was in '87, and I was decorated with a Valour Medal. So
Hmm.
it's our highest award. So it's called the Police Valour Award Medal.
Yeah.
Um, Sort of like the Medal of Honor, I guess.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was decorated with that 7 years afterwards, but also at the same time, I received another one for um, for just turning up to a situation and going, "What the fuck?"
And is
Um,
that and I think I know what you're getting at here, and I want you to tell the whole story, but this is still why you're active in that assault element, right?
No, mate, no. So I'd gone back to intel surveillance. So I was doing criminal intelligence, strategic intel on biker gangs, um, as well as running a surveillance team. So I grew my hair back again. I was back in the covert world, loving it all,
Nice.
and away from the tactical thing, which is really good for my mental health at that stage in
Hmm.
hindsight. I got promoted to detective sergeant, and I went back as a detective because someone said to me, "Look, you're going to have a great career if you don't move from this and go back into the detective world. It's going to be hard to get promotion." And I thought, "Oh, fuck yeah, I guess so." So I went back to wearing a suit and tie, being a detective, which was good, but I'm not a suit and tie sort of guy.
Sure.
Um, so and the next crazy story, and you as an EOD guy, you'll get it as well. So I was in the major crime squad as a detective sergeant, and part of my area of responsibility was running a covert operation for stolen property, jewelry, and cars and stuff. So it was a Saturday, and I took every chance I could to dress in jeans and like casual attire because I hated fucking suits and ties. So I had to go and meet my undercover, and I thought, right, great opportunity, jeans, polo shirt, longish hair, always had longish hair, and go out and see the UC because it's a good reason not to wear a suit and tie.
Sure.
Um, so and I went out, saw him, and we're coming back, my partner and I, in a an unmarked car, and we're coming back into the city. Um, you know, we're going to just cruise in the center of the city and look at the girls like every red-blooded male cop did. And
Perfect.
and we're on our way. Yeah, that was our routine. And on our
Yeah.
way, and we got an any unit call. Any unit in the vicinity of this building in the center of the city, a particular building. Shots fired. And so this is before the gun buyback. So there were still guns everywhere. And we'd had some massacres in Australia before Port Arthur. So, we'd had, God, massacres in Melbourne, Sydney, a couple in Brisbane, where guys had just lost their fucking minds and just shot passers-by. So that's what I immediately thought. Here we go. So, and again, it's the excitement stuff. Let's be honest. A cop hears
Yeah,
a shot fired call, you go, "You beauty, I'm off. This is going to be exciting."
for sure.
So we raced in there, got to this building, and I bounced out of the car. I've got my bloody. I carried a revolver in those days. I had a little, again, the J frame 5 shot
Mhm.
because it was convenient and I was a pretty good shot with it. Um, had a couple of speed strips of spare ammo. I was a bit, I was always prepared. I
Well, after
think
what
I
you've
think a
been
lot
through, I
of
feel like that's justified.
well, yeah, thank you. I was going to say I think a lot of my colleagues might have thought I was a little bit of a cowboy, but what the fuck.
Yeah.
So I've raced towards this building and I saw a news reporter with the camera on her shoulder standing in front of it, a couple of cops sort of milling around, no intercordant, just confusion. So and a lot of people knew who I was, and that sounds a little arrogant, but I had
No,
people
it's the
knew who I
truth,
was. I've
though.
been
I
around.
mean, Yeah,
Yeah.
you had to have been
Um,
in newspapers and all kinds
yeah,
of
yeah.
TV article things. I mean, you had to have had some publicity
Well,
after what you'd been through,
yeah, all that shit.
for
Yeah, yeah.
sure.
And it
Okay.
still embarrasses me a bit, but yeah. So, and I had a good reputation and whatever. So I've sort of run up. I formed an in cordon, got rid of the news people, blah, screamed a few commands, blah blah blah, and raced up. And I'm back into tactical mode.
Hmm.
Going right. If this guy comes out, he's got a rifle. I'm just going to drill him without a problem. And so there was a sergeant on the steps, and I've gone, right, where is he? Where is he? And he said he's actually, just around the corner. So I've done a quick sneak peek, and here's this guy sitting on a floor with beard, long hair, pretty overweight dude, rifle, army webbing, Vietnam era army webbing. This is all registered with me immediately, and a cardboard box with a 12-volt battery. I've gone, phew, oh fuck, that doesn't look too good.
Yeah, it's a
And
bad sign.
and so I've got my firearm in my hand, and I've sort of done just using the cover, just sort of around just to cover. And I said, mate, take it easy, don't do anything stupid. And he said the words were, put the fucking gun down, or I'm going to blow us all up.
Oh
And I went,
boy.
uh-oh. So, and having been a bomb tech, I've sort of looked and gone, oh no, is that what I think it is? So I put the firearm down, and he's just gone, why don't you come in and talk to me? And I have no idea why to this day. But I took a couple of steps and handed my gun to the uniform guy, which I vowed and declared I'd never do. Took a couple of steps closer and started talking to him. And yeah, I'm not a negotiator. I was an assaulter. I was a gunman and all that shit. But I've seen how negotiators work. And first thing you do is introduce yourself. So go, mate, my name's Keith. What's your name? So my name's Frank. I went, okay. And he was wearing an Indian motorcycle T-shirt. And I used to ride a Harley back in the day. So I thought, I'll establish a bit of common ground. I said, so,
For sure.
do you ride an Indian, mate? He went, no, it's like the shirt. Okay, there goes that. Um, so and I said, so, what's in the box, Frank? What do you got? And he had his rifle across his chest with his finger outside the trigger guard, and only people who are trained do that generally. And
Right.
and I thought, oh, that's not a good sign either. And he reached in and pulled out something and tossed it at me. It was a half stick of AN-60 gel ignite, and I caught it, and it was sweating the nitro through the
Oh
brown
yeah.
wrapper. And I thought, oh, this isn't good either.
No.
So as I've gone, fuck, I turned around, and the uniform sergeant, to his credit, he stayed with me for most of the time. He didn't run like a lot of people would have. And he became my sort of, gopher, I guess. Bad word, but said, mate, take this outside. Do not drop it, whatever you do. Get the
Yeah.
bomb squad down here. Get the tactical guys here, blah, blah, blah.
I mean, in our
Um,
world, we would always have like a safety observer with a little bit of standoff if there was ever,
yeah,
and it becomes like what we call P2, which is like a
yeah,
helper.
yeah,
And so that makes
yeah.
it's actually in a lot of worlds that makes tactically total sense that that guy would stay and help. So good for him.
Oh, good for him, yeah, because he wasn't trained. He
Yeah,
just
yeah,
happened to
yeah,
be a uniform guy there.
yeah. But that allows you to focus on the problem and still
Yeah,
slowly get
yeah.
problems out of the way, like
Well,
a stick
yeah.
of shit in
So
your
that's
hand.
and that's how the process was. And the thing was, mate, I was making shit up as I went along, like because I'm not trained in negotiation. I didn't have the time, the patience rather, to negotiate.
Sure.
Um, and I just started talking to this guy, and and here he is. I've gotten closer. I looked in the box, and it turned out to be 15 sticks of jelly, right, with 3 electronic deets, all wired in series, ready to go. Yeah, oh yeah, and the wires are bare. So all he had to do, as you know, touch it to the positive and negatives on the 12-volt battery. We're all gone.
Yeah.
And to make matters worse, then he lights up a cigarette. Oh fuck me! So he's
While it's
smoking
sweating.
over
Yeah.
unstable sweating jelly, and
That's perfect.
I'm battling a hangover too, by the way, because I had a big night the night before. And oh fuck, it's just not getting worse.
This is just all
So
the demons here, and just all culminating at once, man.
all culminating at once, yeah. And 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 it's not funny, but it is. I'd left my wife some time ago, and I hadn't changed my will, so that went through my mind. Um,
Yeah.
so so and mate, I could talk about this for an hour and a half as well, because it took an hour and a half to get it all resolved. But we're sitting there, and one of the first things I said was, "Okay, mate, what's going on? Tell me what's happening. What will it take for you to give me the rifle?" And he said, "Oh, 6 beers." I went, "Oh, fuck, we can't give you 6 beers, mate. I'm not even supposed to be here, let alone give you beer." And I thought if I can establish some sort of connection with him and become human to him, he's going to be less likely to kill me,
Yeah.
and that's pretty much the approach I took. And
Yeah.
so, we talked about the rifle, we talked about the beers. I went outside and there was a commissioned officer there who's, "Oh, fuck." And I said, "So, look, if you get me a pot of light beer, I get the rifle." He said, "We can't do that." I said, "Well, I know we're not supposed to, but I'm telling you, if you get me a pot of
Yeah.
light beer, I'll get that fucking rifle off him." And I said, "Besides, if it all goes to shit and he blows me up, you can fucking blame me." And I was in that mindset, like,
Yeah, for sure.
like
They're
rules
not
are
even
any
going to
rough
know we
rules.
had beer anyway, so just lie about it.
That's right. Just deny everything.
Yeah.
Um, and so, and that worked. So, and the
No
funny thing
kidding.
was, yeah, what he'd done though was, I think it was a magazine of maybe 4 rounds, or maybe 5 rounds or something. And he'd fired a few rounds in the foyer of the building. Two of them had gone through this big plate glass window or wall, floor to ceiling thing beside him. He must have fired all five. But anyway, because he handed me the rifle, then he just grinned at me and ejected the bolt, empty round, and said, "It's fucking empty anyway." Yeah, I said, "Nice work, mate. You win. Good point."
There you
So,
go.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And so we established this real little bond, I reckon.
Hmm.
Um, Over the next, I was up and down. He was going to kill me and he wasn't going to kill me. Then, not long after that, I was told the building, so it was a 25-story building, I think, a business, office building, told it had been evacuated. And of course, ding of an elevator. Oh, fuck, what now? So I look over and out walks this guy in business shirt, tie, business pants, carrying a briefcase with a real attitude. And he looked at me, and I don't look like a cop. He looked at Frank sitting there with a box full of stuff that this guy clearly didn't recognize. Then
Yeah.
he starts to berate us. "What are you two doing in my
Oh, you
building?
have to
Why?
be
How dare
kidding
you
me.
be here?" And Frank started to lose his shit. And I went, "Listen, brother, just leave it with me." So I got up and I grabbed this guy and I said, "Police, you fucking idiot, let's get out of here." So as I'm walking him on, he's going, "Don't you tell me what to do." And I said, "Listen, cunt, if you don't fuck off, I'm going to tear your fucking head off." So pushed him out the front stairs. And there was a little bit of street theatre with that, but also I was going, "Get the fuck out of here." So as I've turned to walk back to Frank, thinking, Frank will love the fact that I've thrown this guy out, Frank starts to scream, "You motherfucker." I turn around, this guy has a notebook and a pen saying, "If you are a policeman, I demand your name and registered number. I'm going to make a complaint." Right.
Yeah.
So I've grabbed him by the throat and said, "Listen, cunt, if you don't get the fuck out of here, I'm going to tear your fucking head off." So I've literally walked out the front and there's cameras everywhere. And I really wish I could have found the news footage, but
I was just gonna
it's
say, tell me
disappeared.
you have that.
Oh, I would have loved it. And I've
Yeah.
just pushed him down the front stairs and just yelled, "Someone get this fucking idiot out of here." So I turned back in, walked back to Frank, and I could see I'm making sort of headway because he's gone, "Oh, that was pretty cool, mate." So, "Thanks,
Right.
buddy." Us against them, us against them.
Nice.
Um, and then, there was some other stuff happened and my pager went off and he lost his shit again. And he said, "Tell him you're with me, tell him you're with me." So I just read my pager and I looked at it and went, "Oh, fuck." And he said, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" And so it's my chick because I'd met my now wife. And so I was supposed to pick her up from shopping, man. I'm going to be in the shit. And he said, "When you get home tonight, she'll understand why." And I thought,
Oh,
aha,
there you
okay,
go.
there's real light at the end of the tunnel. So, and then we talked about why he was there, but the really important. So he'd been in Vietnam, and he was a
Okay.
combat engineer. So he knew how to build an IED. That was his shit. I don't know where he got the sticks of jelly from, but clearly they'd been buried.
Yeah.
He'd come into the building a couple of days before to collect his superannuation. I don't know what the term is over there, but like an accumulated benefit scheme. Um, because he'd had a failed marriage. He had another little kid from a relationship, had to pay maintenance, child support, didn't have
Okay.
any money. And he went into cash this little, I think you call it a K something, whatever your
Case.
pension fund or something is.
Oh,
I don't,
401k.
401k, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So our version of that.
Like there's
And
retirement fund, everything he's saved up.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
which
Okay.
wasn't much. And
Sure.
this guy just laughed at him. He said, "Oh, just laughed at him and said, oh, if you want to cash it in, you have to pay us money because you owe us fees." And that really pissed him off.
I bet.
And so he went home, drank that night, handed his dog tags to his barmaid that he liked, dug the shit up and made an IED. So he's telling me all this. And I could see, that he's struggling, with stuff. And the more he was talking to me about, he said at one stage, I just sometimes I think back to Vietnam and I see myself hovering above where I was and just watching it all happen. And I'm thinking, fuck, that's what happens with me.
Yeah.
And nightmares and sleeplessness and anger. And I'm going tick, 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 tick. I thought, wow. And that was the first time I think, I'm very sure, that I realized I wasn't alone.
Wow.
Even though, I was finding this in this environment, thinking, and I started to talk to him about some stuff. And we were getting to a stage where it was getting really cooperative and he lost his shit again because he'd go up and down.
Yeah.
And then he said, oh, look, Keith, he said, I forgot to tell you I had something else. And he pulled a hand grenade out of his webbing pack and pulled out the pin. And I've gone, okay, okay. So we've had the guy coming down demanding we get out of his building. We've had my girlfriend text me, which frightened the fuck out of him. We've had other shit that happened, and now he's got a hand grenade. I'm going, for fuck's sake. So and he pulled the pin out, and I remember thinking, even if I run, I've only got sort of maybe 5 seconds. You let a grenade, whatever it's called, the handle, arming
Yep.
handle, whatever,
The spoon.
let it go. You've got maybe 5 seconds before it goes boom.
Yeah.
And I thought, even if I get up and I run, this thing's going to sympathetically detonate the 15-6 of gelignite. I'm fucked anyway.
100%.
So I just said, look, man, I said, I've got enough nightmares in my life. I can't let you be another one. Had that conversation. And he looked at me for, seemed like hours, but it was probably only 15, 20 seconds or something.
Sure.
And he said, you're serious, aren't you? And I said, yeah, I'm not going anywhere. Fuck it.
Yeah.
And he put the pin back. He went, okay, well, you can have this thing. And then handed it to the uniform dude again. And then took me another 10 or 15 minutes to talk him into putting the battery to one side, tying the wires together and walking out with me.
No kidding.
And yeah, fucking policing, mate, is unpredictable. You just
What?
never know what the day's going to bring.
And first and foremost, you are a shit magnet.
Yeah, I am.
That's I have some friends who are kind of like that, where you're like, how are you on this deployment of all deployment, and they're just like, I don't know, I was just there, you know.
It just
That's
happens to be there.
you
Yeah,
got,
yeah,
you got that blood in you. But what the crazy part about that, and what, I'm sure this play had to have played a huge role in your future, and what you're doing now with your speaking, and
yeah.
combating mental health, and but your trauma, your experiences saved both of your lives.
I think so. Yeah, yeah.
That's
And I didn't
incredible.
I didn't realize, Jeff, how much that did impact on things until many years later.
I bet. Yeah.
You know,
How did you
because I left
unpack
it.
that? Like you were saying, many years later, like what's triggered it? Like
Yeah.
how did that come about? Were
Well,
you
I resigned from the cops about a year later.
okay?
I was just because I was being headhunted into the corporate world, and
Mm,
I was going to be a lifetime cop because over here you don't leave after 20. You stay until you retire. So there's no pension after 20. Like I've got friends who are in there for 42, 43 years,
oh wow.
and
Okay.
I was going to be one of them. But I got disillusioned with a few things, and in hindsight, I was just so fucked up. I didn't realize I was fucked up. I wasn't sleeping. I was self-medicating again. The anger wasn't going away.
Yeah.
Um, I was overlooked for promotion and told that I wouldn't be promoted because I had medals. So by that time, I'd been decorated.
Hmm.
Um, so both the Valour medals from Queensland Police. I think I'm still the only cop or former cop to have two of them. And that's just because, again, there's no other shit magnets to merge yet, I guess. Um, and I got a bravery medal from the Australian government. And there's a lot of tall poppy syndrome, a lot of jealousy that arrives, when you get decorated. So that was part of it. But I was told my personality needed to change, that I was too, I favoured my people that I worked with too much. I needed to be, more separated from them, and all that shit that isn't a leader in my view.
Yeah.
Um, and at the same time, I was being offered a role in the corporate world where this guy said, "Hey, I want you because, you're great with people, you lead by example." All the things I was being told that was no good in law enforcement, he wanted me to go into the private world for. In hindsight, I was so angry that I let this one senior officer's opinion, and that's all it was, push me into resigning.
Mm.
If I'd been, and I've thought about this a lot, if I'd been more together, I would have gone, "Well, fuck you, Jack. No, that's just what you think. I don't care." But I
Sure.
was so angered by it all, that I just went, "Oh, well, if that's the way they're going to treat me after everything I've done, I'm gone." So I spent the next 27 years, I think, in the corporate world. Went and did a master's of business, did some other stuff, managed, got to be quite a senior executive. But I was still struggling with things. There'd be dark times that would just come upon me without any cause. And I didn't know whether I was exaggerating it, making it up, imagining it, whatever.
Right.
Um, and I went to, go to a counsellor here and there, and I just wasn't getting any traction out of it. I was thinking, it's not going to. Maybe that's got nothing to do with my experiences. Maybe I'm just an angry guy.
Right. Because there's still
Um,
no research on PTSD
at
or
that
any
time,
sort
yeah,
of behavioral
none.
issues.
Yeah, none
Yeah.
at all. Um, but then I went to a meeting where I was sitting with this dude in a government meeting, and there was just something about him, and I thought, oh, interesting. So having a coffee break, I said, "Hey, you always worked in this area?" He said, "No, no, I was in the military." I went, "Oh yeah, what regiment or battalion?" And he started the Special Air Service. I went, "Right." And I always ask veterans, always, "How are you doing?" He'd been overseas to Afghan twice, and he said, "Oh, it's pretty much okay these days. Have my bad times." And as he's talking to me, he's fishing around in his wallet. Yeah, my bad days, but yeah, I'm all good, man. I'm seeing someone who's pretty cool. And there's her business card. And I went, "Wow." And he said, "Oh, you need it, don't you?" And I said, "Does it show that much?" He said, "Oh, fuck, man, it's written all over you."
Yeah.
So, yeah. So I went to his shrink, and she diagnosed me within the first session. And she just said, "You've got chronic anxiety, depression. Sorry, you've
Yeah.
got chronic PTSD, anxiety, and probably depression." And that was really a turning point, because I thought, fuck, there is something that's injured me. There is some reason I'm like this. Now I can figure my shit out and start to work through it.
Yeah.
So that really put me on a path to what I do now. Because I left the corporate world in 2022,
Okay.
and I was a chief operator. I was a COO, so I was pretty senior. Organizational restructure, redundancy package, and went, great. Now I can work and concentrate on stuff I want to do, not because I have to. So a lot of what I do is this conversations with people, and speaking to corporates. I've actually gone back to Queensland Police and presented to the current undercovers.
Oh,
um,
gone full
yeah, it was a
circle.
very cool. Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah, and
bet.
been paid
Yeah.
to do it. Um, so yeah, I talked to a lot of corporates. So I've got a gig coming up in about 6 weeks or so with firefighters here in Victoria,
Very cool.
because the first responder experience is similar. It doesn't matter whether you're a paramedic or a firey, as we call them, or a cop.
Yeah. My
Impacts are
brother,
the same.
my brother's a firefighter in a town not too far away. And
Yeah,
it not my biological brother, but like I have a very tight knit group of friends that I call brothers, and one of them's a
yeah,
firefighter. And he
yeah.
he just messaged me yesterday. Him and his crew did CPR for 3 hours on a
Oh,
patient and just fighting tooth and nail. And I sat down,
wow.
and that one hit me in the heart a little bit. Like, it made me choked up because I know how
Yeah.
hard he was fighting and what he was going for. Like, and the patient didn't make it. So
Mm,
when you're
mm,
talking about, you like they experience traumatic stuff all the like people might not realize how traumatic that is. their
Mm.
family was sitting right there. He's
Yeah.
he's
Wow.
working his ass off to try to save somebody, and he couldn't.
Yeah.
And those things
Yeah.
stick around, and let alone the massive traumas like you're talking about with,
Mm.
gunfights. But man, I have so much respect for those guys because in the military, there's a sense of when you're on like a say a combat deployment, you kind of wire yourself into that mindset versus,
Mm.
you're sleeping in bed at midnight at the station, a bell rings, and then 2 hours later you're pumping on a dude's chest for 3 hours, and their family's
Yeah.
sitting there looking at you like, why'd he die? I don't
Yeah.
know. There's something
Yeah.
different
Yeah.
about it.
Oh, there is, mate. And I have this conversation with Troy a lot. I've got so much respect for the military, particularly the special forces guys. And what they've done. And Troy says, "Hey, we were trained for it. We prepared for it. We knew what we were getting into. We got all the backup in the world." He said, "Cops do this every day.
Yeah.
Every day they strap on a 9 mil or a 40 cal, and they don't know what they're walking into."
Yep.
We had a tragic murder over a year ago of two young cops in Western Queensland.
I
They
heard
had
about
four
this.
of these, yeah, William Biller,
Hmm.
terrible, terrible shit. Survivalists and whatever the hell they were, who just gunned them down with high-powered rifles and murdered
Yeah.
them. And that, but you don't have to. I say to people, you don't need to be in a gunfight to have trauma. You don't need to be in a traumatic situation. It can just be a build-up of sediment over the years of just seeing shit,
Absolutely.
car accidents, domestic stuff, suicides, the things that human beings do to each other,
Hmm.
and stuff that affects your moral compass, and all of that can build up and just one day just go straight over the rim of the cup,
Yeah.
and boom. So
So the work you're
and
doing
I
now, you're diving head first into this world, and you're
yeah,
reaching out and
yeah,
speaking, and you've written a couple
yeah.
books too.
Yeah, I wrote a couple of books. Yeah, I started writing about my undercover stuff. Well, actually, the first chapter I ever wrote was about the MLC siege with Frank and the bomb and the hand grenade and the rifle.
Okay.
And because I didn't write, yeah, I just wrote back because I just had this urge to write some stuff to give to my daughters because they grew up with a father who never violent, but certainly short-term anger about just something would fall out of the fridge, I'd lose my shit.
Yeah.
Um, and uh, and I just wanted to be in a situation where I could give them something to read to go, hey, this is what your dad did that might, maybe help you understand a bit. And the more that I wrote and I gave to people to read, the more they went, oh man, we need more of this. So then I wrote my first one about undercover, and a friend of mine sent it to a publisher because she had a contact, and he came back within a week and went, bam, here's your contract. Wow. So then I wrote the second one, which is about the tactical stuff and PTSD and whatever. Excuse me. And he again signed it up with an advancement contract immediately. So what it's done, mate, is and authors don't make a lot of money out of books, by the way. The only way you get really rich is if you're Stephen King or something,
Yeah.
um, or Tony Robbins. But for me, it's an ability to get the story out there, so that when people, and I get so much feedback from people who read it, both men and women, both military and police, and also civilians who read it, and they'll send me a little personal message to go, hey, just finished your book. Thanks so much for talking about mental health. For years
Yeah.
I've hid it away. Now I feel comfortable talking to my partner or my kids or my family. That's awesome. That's why you know that's
Absolutely.
why I promote them.
I
Just
bet.
to
Because so when would you say that what was kind of the moment in your life that you realized that you had the experiences and you had come far enough in your healing process to have the confidence to then help others heal?
oh, that's a great question, mate. I reckon it'd be when I did my first podcast. So that was probably 2022,
Okay.
maybe late 2022, and ironically, with a three RAR military veteran here called Matty Morris, who runs this podcast called Zero Limits.
Yeah, I did
And
episode 67 with him.
oh, there you go.
Yeah,
All
him and
right,
I.
I'll listen to it.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
please. Yeah, Maddie's awesome. And I actually,
let me write that down.
yeah,
Cool.
yep. But
Um,
and if anyone out there is willing, I mean, obviously we're gonna throw some plugs in for you, Keith, because you got a lot of good content out there. But
yeah,
there's
thanks, mate.
the Warrior Enigma's picking up. We got good guests coming down the pipe, and one of them is Maddie. Maddie said he would definitely
Yeah,
hop on and
awesome.
talk because he's got a great
Yeah,
story too.
Yeah, he
You
has.
know, in
Yeah,
Troy. There's a
yeah,
lot of Australians coming down the
yeah,
pipe for this one. So
yeah.
yeah, you're going to hear the word
And
cunt a
I,
lot.
yes, you will.
But that's awesome.
um,
So you and Maddie,
and I
that
think that
was
was a
your first
yeah,
podcast.
yeah, yeah,
That's
and that just gave
awesome.
me confidence to talk then. And I guess the other things, mate, it's and you would have seen I'm moving in my chair a lot because I still feel uncomfortable um, giving people the impression that I'm talking myself up, and I don't intend that. Like
No.
it's we call it, it's not the tall poppy syndrome, but um, when I was a kid, my hero was Audie Murphy, the most decorated soldier in combat soldier in World War
Oh
Two.
yeah. Yeah, yeah.
And I've been to Arlington a few times. I always go and find his grave. And I remember I read his autobiography or something. And in the photos, he didn't wear all his ribbons. He didn't talk about his medals much. That was
Yeah.
it. And I used to think, oh wow, why wouldn't you? Because it's so great. Now that I'm in that situation myself, it
Yeah.
still makes me uncomfortable to talk about them. And now so I understand why.
Well, that's internal
But I think,
humility. You know,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and I think, you know, and I don't want to speak for you, but there's definitely a ton of people who have the clout to, you know, puff their chest and wear their ribbons and do all that. But I think along with earning that much medal,
Mm,
if you will, like those accolades and that notoriety, it seems to me that that humbles you to a point where you realize that's not what you're doing. You were doing what you loved or what you thought you wanted to do, and all of that came with it. And now, because you're still, it's the same kid who joined and was dealing with drug dealers but didn't want to drink a beer.
yeah,
You know what I'm
that's
saying?
right.
It's still you from childhood.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
just who you are. You
yeah,
have the
yeah.
ability, and like the story you're telling me is absolutely incredible. And for you to kind of fidget and be like, it's still uncomfortable. Like, dude, to me, that just means that you are the genuine thing. That it's
No, thanks, brother.
yeah, nothing. You
Thank
didn't
you.
kick a door because you wanted to be on a poster, you know. You know, you kicked that door
Yeah,
because
yeah,
you wanted to do it. That was your job, and that's, you know, I don't
yeah,
know.
yeah.
That's my take on the whole thing, though. So
No, I appreciate that, mate. Thank you,
yeah,
thank you. But so now, yeah, I just feel very comfortable and very confident, but also comfortable in telling my story. I never used to be able to talk about Peter's. My shrink has told me, what really fucked me up was survivor guilt, and I saw my friend murdered.
yeah,
Because I used to talk about death or shooting. And she went, no, you saw your friend murdered. That's I can call it for what it is. Um, I never used to be able to talk about that without crying a lot
yeah,
for years. And since I've been diagnosed, since I've done a lot of media, so TV and whatever, and talked about my story, for me it's now a catharsis, and and I know that the message that people out there will hear this and go, hey, this was a guy who had a gun in his mouth, who's going to kill himself, and now he's openly talking about mental health. That helps people. I know it does.
yes,
And just having that, and it's not about courage, but having the confidence to say, hey, I've got some mental health issues, I need some help. And people who are reached out to, I say this in all of my presentations and whatever, is if someone says to you, fuck, I need to have a talk to you because I'm not doing too well, the best thing you can do is say, yep, talk to me, and then shut the fuck up.
right,
Don't try and solve their problems. Just
right,
let them talk. Yeah. Because we, as nice people, we try to provide a solution. No, that's not what
mhm,
you want to hear. You just want someone to sit down in the weeds with you and just, you know, be
sure.
able to express shit.
And I think it's important to reiterate something you said earlier, which is everybody has some form of trauma.
Yeah,
So for the people out
yeah,
there listening, you know, I know we're focusing on like a really high kinetic, fast pace, you know,
mm,
pretty gnarly career, but there's even the people who have had, you know, relatively like sedentary lifestyles or,
mm,
you know, have followed the quote unquote social, like, no, graduated high school and did well, went to
yeah,
college and did well, got married and did well, you know, they still have traumas, and
yeah,
they can affect you very negatively, and it can come up years later.
yeah,
And, you know, so
absolutely.
I'm absolutely a huge proponent of mental health too, and I didn't really realize it till later in my military career, but that's part of this platform. And you know,
Mm,
what you're saying about reaching out and talking to someone and that person just shutting the fuck up and listening. And
Yeah.
sometimes that's all the therapy that someone needs is like, dude, I've just never told anyone that,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
hearing it out of your own mouth changes how your brain perceives it. And steps can be had. And there's so much process that goes along with all this. But man, everybody has demons. And to what
Yeah, they
extent
do.
is
Yeah.
internal to each person. But wow.
Yeah.
So this stuff you're
Yeah.
doing, it's reaching literally everybody. There's
Yeah.
not
Thank
there's
you.
not
Yeah.
one person who can say like, nope, I'm perfect. Like,
No,
yeah, I mean,
no,
you
everybody,
might
you're
perceive
right.
it that way, and I'm glad you're happy,
Yeah.
but there's something in there that's, so
Yeah, that's right.
this is big
And
stuff,
the
man.
other thing that, and I'm sorry to overtalk you, mate. I get
No.
excited when I
Yeah,
meet
please,
like-minded
please.
people. The other thing that really pisses me off is the misappropriation of the term PTSD.
Mm.
Yeah. I read something Barbara Streisand says she's got PTSD because she fucking forgot the words to a song in a concert 30 years ago. Seriously, it's like you
Yeah.
go, no, man, you trust me, you don't want it. It's not cool to have PTSD. You
Yeah.
can have mine. Um,
It's like people
and
use it as a crutch
yeah,
and that goes into,
yeah,
those are not genuine people. So those are the people who will use quote unquote traumatic experiences and who am I to say that it's not traumatic at some point or some issue, but to call it PTSD and
mm,
bring that clout on yourself is the exact opposite of feeling fidgety when someone's like, wow, you're decorated on it. It's like you're
yeah,
drawing it
yeah,
in for the notoriety.
yeah, exactly.
And it's
Yeah,
absolutely,
yeah,
it's disgusting because we see it a lot up here in the states.
mm,
We had a reporter one time. There was this big issue with gun control, and everyone was freaking out. And it was still a huge issue, but at the time there was this huge push, and they had a reporter go and shot a shotgun at a
mm.
range, and they filmed him and everything. And he shot it, dropped the shotgun, and then melted down on live TV, claimed
Wow.
PTSD, and got a medical retirement from the news network.
Oh, fair dinkum.
That so
Jesus.
when you're saying like, yeah, people are claiming like,
Wow.
the singers forgetting words or this dude
Yeah.
shooting a shotgun once, like, hey guys,
Wow.
let's
Wow.
reevaluate this a little bit. Yeah,
Yeah. And the other, because the other thing, mate, it affects the credibility of those who genuinely struggle with the disorder.
a hundred
And
percent.
it will absolutely, I think, have the impact of further isolating them so they don't share it.
Right.
Because, if they come across, someone comes up and goes, I think I've got PTSD. You're just like Barbara Streisand. No, they're
Yeah,
just going to withdraw again.
a hundred
So all of
percent.
this is doing so much damage, and people like you and me and Troy and Maddie, we're all about the conversation and drag it out of the shadows because it was there for way too long.
Mhm.
I've had friends who were in the cops kill themselves, sadly, fuck, over the last 25 years
Mhm.
because they just felt that they couldn't talk to anybody.
Yeah.
And it's just, we've just got to change that narrative. We've got to
Yep.
change that whole mindset. Yeah.
And what I've in at least in my experience, I lost a friend in December. He took his own life because he was dealing with
Uh,
mental health, and there's been several before that that were seeking help even and couldn't fight the urge and took their own lives. Um,
yeah, I'm sorry for that.
but well, I mean, unfortunately, in the lines of work that we do, when you put yourself in, when you open that door and invite in chaos, you get chaos. That's what you get,
Mm.
and that shows its face in many shapes and forms, and you deal with it differently.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but the one of the things that stuck out to me was a friend of mine told me that you just have to beat it in that moment. So like
Yeah.
you, when you had the gun in your mouth, and everybody who's been in that moment before will know exactly what I'm talking about. When you just have to beat it, like right now is the choice point. If I can beat it
Mm.
right now, in 30 seconds from now, when I put that down, my whole life is different. The
Yeah.
emotions change instantly, something changes in you, and that no longer is an option, but you have to win for 30 seconds
Yeah.
or
Right.
you disappear, you're gone. And
Yeah. Yeah.
so it's very very powerful stuff when you think about it, that 30 seconds can determine the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And it
Absolutely.
did for
Yeah.
you, and now look at you now. It's a
Yeah.
tough fought battle, a very aggressive battle, but now you're using that in such a positive way to truly influence people and help people, and it's remarkable.
No, thank you, mate. That's that makes me feel very humble. But no, I really appreciate that because if I can touch one life, and that's fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Well, that's awesome,
mm,
dude. I mean, you've been doing a lot of public speaking events, right? So you kind of corporate. Do you do just kind of open forum? Like, have you ever reserved a large space and just advertised and said, I'm going to talk about this, and kind of done it
um,
as like a,
no, but that's probably the next step,
okay,
because I've just really gone along for the ride at the moment. I
okay.
don't market or anything. I don't rely on this as a revenue stream or whatever. Yeah, I've just sort of grown it organically,
Yeah.
and
Well, I mean, it's only been what, 3 years since
yeah, yeah,
yeah. So, I mean,
yeah,
in retrospect, that's super new to the game of, getting out there
yeah,
and, boots on the
yeah.
ground. 3 years is not much time to really,
No, true.
broaden the horizon. So there's a lot of, so is that kind of the next step you're thinking, is just keep pushing it
I'd
up
like,
and out?
yeah, yeah. I'd like to just have an open auditorium, and maybe cover my costs or something, and just keep people in and just say, hey, let's
Absolutely.
have a talk. You know,
Very cool.
um, because I just think paying it forward, and as I said, mate, impacting one life, impacting 1,000 lives, just as important.
Hmm.
Because there are, and I know there are people who listen to these conversations and they just go, "Fuck, I might rethink my life, which would be good."
Yeah. Well, I
Um,
mean, shoot, just your conversation with Frank, right? Like,
yeah, yeah,
I know
yeah,
that's different circumstances, but that was when you were like, oh, shoot, there's people like me.
yeah, yeah,
And so
exactly,
if people are
exactly
listening,
right.
I know, if people are
Yeah,
listening and they have problems, well,
yeah,
Keith has problems. I have problems.
yep.
You're not alone. Not
You're
in
not
the
alone. Yeah,
slightest. So,
that's the main message that I try to tell her. Every chance I get, you're not alone. Because
absolutely.
you and I both know the personalities, the shy, the damaged people who just sit at home alone,
Hmm.
and they think that's it. They
Yeah.
don't think there's anybody out there who cares. And there are people who care. And the main thing is, no, you're not going through this by yourself.
Hmm. And
It's
be
okay.
sitting in seclusion is the worst possible thing that you can do.
Yeah,
If there's the
yeah.
slightest inclination in your body to want to get better, or to want to feel
Mm,
happiness again, or to drop the
mm,
baggage, the pain that you're feeling, yeah, it can't be alone. It can't.
mm. Yeah,
I don't think
exactly.
I've ever met anybody who's like, nope, I overcame it all by myself. Like,
Yeah,
you
yeah. Well,
just don't hear
they're
that.
lying.
Yeah, right. So, man, so
Yeah,
that's the
cool.
next steps for you, is just up and out and keep the mission going, keep broadening and
Yeah,
keep talking. That
yeah, yeah,
phenomenal.
yeah.
Right
No,
on.
that's and I love to do it. So yeah, and
We,
it really gives me that good old sensation of accomplishing something,
yeah,
and a sense of purpose. Mm.
right. Well, man, we've been talking for 2 hours now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think
Shit, we have to.
we're right at the 2 hour mark. And I
Wow.
try to keep them under 2 hours, but man,
Yeah.
I'm anxious to keep learning more. You're a phenomenal human being, Keith, and thank you for
Oh,
telling the
thank you, brother.
story. This has been a pleasure, absolutely, and
Yeah.
I'm very humbled
Yeah.
and gracious to hear your story and where you're going with it. I don't think there's a better platform you could have picked up and run with. So I mean, shoot, me listening to it, I start thinking about myself and, the things that I'm
Yeah.
battling with,
Good.
and the people around
Yeah.
me, and maybe what they're battling with. So hopefully this goes out to anybody who hears this, and they can start thinking, and that emotional context where you start to look at other people differently, where I don't know what's going on in their life, but maybe I should just ask them, hey, how are you doing, right? And
Yeah.
that can
Yeah.
go viral.
Exactly right.
Forget
Exactly
these
right.
Instagram memes and TikTok videos and all
Yeah.
that
Yeah. Yeah.
bullshit. Like,
Yeah.
that's not
Yeah.
true virality. Like, if you want a true viral sensation, go ask someone how they're doing.
Exactly right. Don't wait for a specific day in the calendar.
Yeah, well, and the sad thing is, that there will be that one day that was one day too late.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
So,
No.
well, brother, I don't know what else to say. Like, you got me pretty heartfelt here. So thank you so much
Oh,
for the talk,
oh,
dude.
mate.
And I very much appreciate your time. And if there's any way that I can support you, I got tiny little podcast here, but my friends and family are going to be moved by this one for sure. So if there's anything I
Yeah.
can do
Thanks,
to
man.
push the mission, or help you advertise, or for listeners out there, like, I'm going to put all Keith's information in the description down below on YouTube. Everybody, follow the link and at least give it a see. And all the US listeners, being up here and distance from you, but hopefully we can reach a
Yeah.
couple people down there in Australia and get them into at least thinking about what you got going on. And if they can come see you, I think it would, man, you got a
Yeah.
big
Thanks.
platform to change some people's lives, brother.
Thanks, brother. I much appreciate it. Anybody out there in the US, if they want to read a book, it's on Amazon, Kindle. Just, it doesn't cost a lot of money. Just have a read of it. Yeah, and maybe just it'll give you an insight if you're not in law enforcement. It'll give you an insight into what being a cop is like. It's not just about writing traffic tickets. There's a
Yeah,
lot more to it.
absolutely.
Mm.
All right, brother. Well,
Cool. Thanks, brother.
absolutely, guys. And once again, all the information will be in the description. Check Keith out. Keith, brother, once again, thank you so much for
Thank
everything
you.
you've done, man.
Thank you. Thanks for having a chat, mate.